This is a sports catastrophe production. Hey there, it's Jeff Cutter. I welcome you to another sports catastrophe on this day. And on this day, August the 19th, in 1957, the New York Giants, not that New York Giants team, like the football team, the baseball team, decided that they will head to San Francisco because they just couldn't get anything going. Well, that. Now, the New York Giants baseball team is famous because every year of existence since the modern opening in 1901, that being when there was an American League and National League, they had at least one Hall of Fame player on each year of their roster. Not even the Yankees have that. Kind of weird, don't you think? Anyway, this was the 75th season that the New York Giants were going to be playing. Well, playing in New York, the Giants franchise. They were part of the National League in the 1883 season and all that because Jim Moultrie had two teams in New York, one called the Mets, one called the Giants. It's true. So anyway, the 1957 New York Giants started off badly. Hoyt Wilhelm was traded to St. Louis for Whitey Lockman. The New York Giants were a fantastic franchise. In the 1900s, they won a few titles. Christy Mathewson, Carl Hubble, Bill Terry, Mel Ott, Willie Mays, being great New York Giants, Bobby Thompson. Oh yeah, the list goes on. Ross Youngs. So the New York Giants were decent. They were memorable. It was their most memorable season was 1951 when they came back from 13 games back in the National League. And remember, at that time, before 1969, if you had to win the American League and the National League, and those would be that would be the World Series matchup. There was no other extra playoff rounds. So the New York Giants came back to win and had to go to a best-of-3 playoff with Brooklyn. After losing Game 1, no, they won Game 1 thanks to a Bobby Thompson home run. But it wasn't a game-winning home run because, Brooklyn could have won on home turf, and they didn't. Game 2, Brooklyn came back with a Clem Levin complete game shutouts. And then on 3 days rest, Don Newcomb pitched over 150 pitches for Brooklyn. Obviously, his arm wore down. But he was having the Dodgers up 4-1 in the ninth. And then bad hitting and bad positioning happened. Yada, yada, yada. Bobby Thompson hits a 3-1 home run. Russ Hodges call almost got lost in history, but a Brooklyn fan actually taped it because he wanted to hear Russ Hodges crying over the radio when the Giants lost. But he actually decided to sell it for a carton of cigarettes, and that's why you have that recording in history. The Giants had one big problem. Their stadium, the Polo Grounds. Yes, it was a famous stadium. And yes, they're contrary to popular belief, the Polo Grounds didn't have polo. So the Giants decided they needed to move. The Polo Grounds was crumbling, and it was in a bad neighborhood. So, and worst of all, across the river, as it seemed, the Yankees put up their Yankee Stadium. Remember, the New York Yankees used to play at the Polo Grounds too, before 1923, when they built original Yankee Stadium. So Polo Grounds was unique. They had very deep center field fences, over 440 feet to center field. And left field and right field was less than 300. So that's crazy, all that. And of course, the Polo Grounds was where Willie Mays made his famous over-the-shoulder catch in Game 1 of the 1954 World Series. And, from his spot where he caught it, he threw a great pitch to the infield. Giants went on to win that World Series 4 straight over the 1954 Indians, which was shocking. The Giants needed a new stadium, and they were contemplating moving from New York. Some say they were headed for Minneapolis and the newly considered Metropolitan Stadium, which was home to their farm team. The Giants' ownership of that team actually gave priority rights to a major league team in the area. But then the Giants were approached by San Francisco Mayor George Christopher. Despite objections from shareholders, the owner, Horace Stoneham, actually entered into negotiations with San Francisco. Around the same time, Walter O'Malley was courting the city of Los Angeles. So anyway, the Giants decided to move to California because San Francisco would build them a nice stadium, and baseball would be played west of Missouri for the first time ever. So yeah, San Fran was too enticing. Now, of course, Los Angeles was aiming to move to California. The Dodgers were moving from Brooklyn to LA. Obviously, the Giants went first, and everyone knew that the New York Giants would leave for San Francisco. However, contrary to popular belief, the Brooklyn Dodgers didn't set, didn't announce they were moving to Los Angeles until after the 1957 season. So basically, there was no proper farewell to the Dodgers being in Brooklyn. The Giants had some very decent players on their team: Whitey Luckman, Hank Sauer, Willie Mays, Don Mueller. Yeah, Red Shondace was even on that roster of the 1957 Giants that moved from New York to Los Angeles. Bobby Thompson was on that team. Dusty Rhodes was not the wrestler. Wes Westrom. Yeah. And the pitching staff, Ruben Gomez and Johnny Antalali, with Stu Miller and Mike McCormick, Marv Grissom. Willie Mays was part of that team and was not happy moving to San Francisco. But anyway, the Giants needed to do it because their stadium was crumbling and no one was doing a damn thing about it. So, yeah. And then the Dodgers decided to move to Los Angeles for sure. Like, there were rumors they were moving to LA, but basically, there was a chance they could have stayed in Brooklyn. But in the end, Brooklyn screwed over the Dodgers. And that the New York City Comptroller Robert Moses screwed them over because he refused to have the Dodgers play in a stadium closer to Brooklyn. He wanted it exactly where Shea Stadium was. So yeah, crazy. So yeah, the Giants kind of did themselves in, but at least the Giants had the decency to play a final farewell game. Whereas the Dodgers moved to Los Angeles in the offseason without saying goodbye properly to Brooklyn. Yeesh. Anyway, I'm Jeff Diamond. I do.